Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Hillary Raimo Show, Matters for Mind, Body, and Spirit Talk Radio. I'm so excited about tonight's show. Returning is Barbara Clow, one of my very favorite guests, and she's going to be talking to us tonight about updates on where we are on an individual and collective level this month astrologically and how it relates to predictions and understanding of the Mayan calendar and where we are right now with it. There's been a lot of talk about 2012 and all of these things, and everybody's got their ideas and a lot of speculation about what's going to happen and what we're going to experience. But what Barbara does and what she's going to do for us tonight is she's going to talk about what we're experiencing in relation to the Mayan calendar right now. So it's going to be a very exciting show because we are so affected by what goes on, and she's an expert astrologer and, in my opinion, one of the best resources for the Mayan calendar, and her work has been profound. She's author of the Mayan Code, Time, Acceleration, and Awakening the World Mind. And hopefully we have her on the line. Hi, Barbara. Are you there?
Hi, Hillary. I'm here.
Welcome back. I'm so excited to have you tonight.
I'm so happy to be back. This is just such an amazing moment in time. We're lucky to be able to talk.
Well, let me just let everybody who's listening know that we are taking calls tonight. If you have a question related to the Mayan calendar, topic specific, and you would like to speak to Barbara and ask a topic specific question, we are taking calls. The number is 888-235-7374. Or if you'd like to go to Achieve Radio homepage, you can Skype in or send me an in-quick message that I can read live on the air. So, Barbara, where are we at right now? We have July eclipses. We have so much stuff going on.
Right. Well, first of all, Hillary, we're in the middle of an amazing correspondence between the astrological field and the Mayan calendar. And when I talk about the Mayan calendar, what I'm referring to is Carl Johann Kallmann's analysis of the Mayan calendar, which is an evolutionary theory based on time acceleration, which, of course, is what the Mayan Code is about. And, of course, we've discussed that at length before and on this show. And where we are right now is we're just past the middle of day 6. And day 6, that is, of the galactic underworld, which started in 1999 and goes through 2011. And as you know from previous discussions, we're in the 8th underworld. We've already gone through 7 of them, and we're in the middle of the 8th one. And we can look at the correspondences back to the underworlds, the day 6s of the underworlds, in order to understand what's going on now. So that's one way we can kind of get a handle on where we are in terms of the Mayan calendar. And then as far as astrology is concerned, we're right in the middle of a really extraordinary eclipse cycle, as well as a couple of major transits. So I think it'd be kind of fun to try to put those two things together. It's a lot for one person to hold in their head, but I think we can get our way through it to pick out some of the significant elements of it.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I also want to let everybody know that we did do previous shows where Barbara has gone very much in depth to the long count and describing what she means by day 6 and the underground, the underworlds and all of that terminology. So after the show, if you'd like to go back into my archives, her shows are still there. I highly suggest you listen. It's really phenomenal, foundational information. So we're going to kind of move forward, and we're going to keep talking about the now and how it relates to the eclipse that are going on this month.
Okay. So first of all, regarding day 6, the 2 previous underworlds that are relevant to the current one, which is called the galactic underworld, which again goes from 1999 to 2011. The 2 previous ones that are they're relevant to this underworld because this underworld is processing what happened before during these previous ones. So the one just before this is 1755 through 2011 AD, and that's called the planetary underworld. And that is the cycle, and in terms of our evolution on this planet, of industrialization. It's the period on our planet when industry developed and we started to become more global instead of just being stuck in our particular village or region or country. And then the underworld before that is called the national underworld, which is a 5,125-year cycle, and it's the cycle of civilization. And so suddenly, around 3,115 BC, civilization just sprung up all over the planet, and historians constantly go on and on about suddenly there was Sumer in Egypt and China and Mesoamerica. And so that particular cycle is really relevant to us at this current moment because according to Kalaman's theory, the galactic underworld, which is a 12-year period from 1999, is processing all of those themes of civilization and dumping some of the systems that we have developed during that 5,125-year cycle. In other words, we're going beyond hierarchies and priests and kings, and we're moving into a more egalitarian civilization on this planet. And then we're also going through processing the industrial underworld and all of the economic and societal themes that have to do with the development of industry, which also, of course, includes the ecological crisis. So, according to Kalaman, we can take the days of the galactic underworld, we can look at 2009, and we can go back into the planetary, the 250-year cycle, or we could go back into the national in order to get a grip on what is happening at this moment and also what might be happening next. So what I can give you is the corresponding dates. The planetary underworld day 6 was 1952 to 1972. And right now we're about at 1966 through 68 in terms of a correspondence to the current moment, and that's to July 2009. And then in the national underworld, the day 6 is 829 to 1223 AD, which is, of course, the medieval period. And the corresponding period is 1090 to 1150 AD. And so I'm doing a bunch of teaching and lectures this summer, so I've already gone back into those periods and studied them quite intensely. And if you go back to 1952 to 72 or back to 1090, 1150, what you see in both cases is a profound turning point in society and in the world. And I'm mainly looking at this from the point of view of Western culture and especially Western Europe. And the reason for that is that Kalaman believes that there is a midline on the planet going through Italy and Germany and up to Scandinavia, and that the energy is generated and tends to gather around that midline. So I don't want to sound too Eurocentric, but I'm looking at it from that point of view because of the way the planet seems to be constructed. So if we go back to 1966 to 68, I'm sure that rings some bells for you, right? Remember that? Summer of Love, 1967?
So let me just interrupt here real quick. Do we look at those time frames and compare them to where we are right now, July 2009? Is that what you're describing?
Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm taking July 2009, which is day 6 of the galactic underworld. Day 6 is November 2008 through November 2009. So we're like two-thirds of the way through it. And so then all I have to do is go back to the day 6 of the planetary, which happens to be 1952 through 72, and I can get the corresponding dates, and I did the same thing with the national. And the reason that we're doing this is because Kalaman has convinced me and a whole lot of other people that the galactic underworld is like churning up all of the themes and all of the creations and changes during the planetary, the industrial, and the national, the development of civilization. It's churning them all over again because what's going to happen is the parts of those creations that by our society that are dysfunctional and are holding us back from the next level are shifting into a completely new place. Mm-hmm. So, you following me? Yeah. So when we go back to the 1966 to 68, this is relevant information for what's going on during July 2009. And I've been, of course, since I discovered Kalaman in 2005, I've been doing this month by month, year by year, checking to see if there is a relationship and if there is any relevant information. And, of course, the Mayan code is based on an analysis of things from that point of view. And so if we go back to 66 to 68, we slam dunk right into the period after Kennedy and Johnson came in, and then we had the Vietnam War. And if you go back to 1966, that's when the resistance really began. And that's when we started to have civil rights demonstrations and anti-war demonstrations, and also a push in the culture by the young generation for art and creativity and a breakthrough into high consciousness. For example, Eastern meditation techniques at that time became part of what people were seeking. And so that is, if you think about it, 1966 through 68 is definitely a huge turning point that all of us remember at the current moment, I think. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's so interesting, actually. And so when we look at so the Mayan calendar, in your opinion, is at work, pretty much all the time, right? It's not just about moving into 2010, 11, and then up to the 2012 that everybody's talking about. So it's been working on us this whole time. What do you think happens at the end of the calendar? I know we're kind of going off topic for a second, but what do you think? And I know you've answered this before on other shows, but refresh my memory.
Bleeping, is that you or is that me? I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that we're looking at Earth changes where it's going to be, there's an end of the world theory that's out there. There's a new movie coming out called 2012 that's very catastrophobia-like. You talk about it really just stirs up all of these emotions of the end of the world kind of thing. And other people say it's just a change in consciousness and it's just a cycle. But, they were so clear and so specific about the timing and the different levels of that. And it's so in-depth. And it's just kind of strange to me that it just stops at a certain time. Do you believe
the
that
calendar stops? We don't. We don't stop. But what Kalaman believes, and he sure convinced me. As a matter of fact, I just finished. You remember Teilhard de Chardin, the great evolutionist in the 50s and 60s? He was a paleontologist and a Jesuit, and he was the first person who really wrote about evolution in terms of looking at it from the point of view of the omega point. In other words, that our species is actually pushing toward this omega point where we're going to leap to another level. And so Kalaman really is the next step beyond Chardin, because he's working with the same idea of us moving to a pinnacle of evolution. But where Kalaman comes in is he discovered the timing of this principle in the Mayan calendar itself. In other words, it's a remarkable step to find the timing for the evolution of our species to a critical leap point in the Mayan calendar itself. So where Kalaman differs only slightly from some of the other researchers is that Kalaman believes that the time acceleration factor of the calendar ends in October 28, 2011. So Kalaman has this whole evolutionary push from 16.4 billion years ago, which is the Big Bang, through October 28, 2011. And what he's really saying is that the time acceleration factor and the evolutionary push finishes itself October 28, 2011, and then we go into another whole realm and zone of consciousness. So what he's really saying is that the push by means of time is ending, but that doesn't mean the planet or the universe or the solar system is ending, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. In your book, The Pleiadian Agenda, which was a fabulous book, by the way, you talk about working with other beings from other places, other dimensions. I'm a big fan of Alchemy in 9 Dimensions, as you know, and I'm curious if the influx of other, beings from different dimensions increases at this time.
Well, this is a great point to bring up on your part, because, of course, a lot of people wonder, well, why have I adopted Kalaman when I'm a major researcher and teacher myself? And it's because Kalaman's theory is the final point of everything that I was trying to figure out for like 35 years. And the point of the Pleiadian Agenda and Alchemy of 9 Dimensions is really that as we come closer and closer to the critical leap, that our consciousness, this is human consciousness, is being pushed to a level of development where we are going to be accessing 9 dimensions of consciousness. And these 9 dimensions start with the iron core crystal of the Earth. So this is a very profoundly grounded system. And then the higher dimensions of this system involve teachings from the Pleiadian star system, the Sirius star system, the Orion star system, even Andromeda Galaxy is involved in this. Now, the way this information came to me in 1995 was by channeling. So I brought in this whole complicated cosmology involving these different star systems. And then when I started researching my own book, which I published in Alchemy of 9 Dimensions, I discovered that the way our galaxy is structured, there's a section of our galaxy called Gould's Belt, and that all of these entities that I had picked up under channeling are actually part of a subsystem within our galaxy itself, such as Orion and the Pleiades and the Sirius star system. I didn't know any of that stuff when I channeled this book. So I seem to have picked up on some kind of consciousness that is really affecting our planet in a very profound way. And fortunately, the Pleiadians brought through extremely detailed information about that, how it works and how we can utilize that. So I've just simply been teaching this rich data bank, and the more I teach it, the more I understand it myself. Then, in 2005, I discovered Kalaman's research, because the big mystery in my own work was, according to the Pleiadians, the 9th dimension of consciousness, which is the highest dimension that we can be in touch with and express. The 9th dimension of consciousness is actually the Mayan calendar. It's called, the Pleiadians called it Tzolk'in, which is the term for the 260-day calendar. So what the Pleiadians were saying way back in 1995 is that the highest dimension for us is the ability to be in touch with resonation from Tzolk'in and resonation from the 9th dimension. In other words, the Pleiadians were really saying what Teilhard de Chardin said back in the 1950s when he came through. And Teilhard de Chardin was an evolutionist, and he was also a Catholic priest. And he had a real conflict with the church about this. But since he was a paleontologist and the discoverer, by the way, of some hominid skulls, he was not going to give in on what the church thought about evolution. And so he wrote a major book called The Phenomenon of Man. And the essence of the phenomenon of man is that the highest pinnacle of our own evolution is to become a self-reflective species that comprehends its own evolutionary progress. And then once it does that, then we as a species can intentionally create the next step. You follow that?
Yeah.
So then Kalaman comes through in this, late 90s and early 21st century, and he comes through with the literal revelation, as far as I'm concerned, that the Mayans, 1,000 to 2,500 years ago, knew about the timing of our evolutionary attainment. They recorded it in the calendar, and they knew about our evolutionary process, and they understood the timing of it. And so what this is really saying is that omega point, that culmination point, is going to be happening during 2011. There's one more underworld. We're in the 8th underworld right now, the galactic, which is 1999 through 2011. And then according to the calendar, or to Kalaman's analysis of the calendar, for only 260 days during 2011, our evolutionary speed is going to be going 20 times faster than it has been since 1999.
It's just it's fascinating to me. Listening to you talk, it's like you can just feel it. And I wanted to ask you, now, somebody had brought this to my attention in one of my conversations someplace, and what do you feel about the elite in this world using the Mayan calendar for their own personal agenda?
Well, they always use everything for their own personal agendas, like that's, I'm sure that when the conquistadores came into Mesoamerica and Central South America, I'm sure that they picked up a whole bunch of copies of the Mayan calendar data, and that they still have it in their secret archives. That's what it's all about, really. The funny thing about that, Hillary, is that secrecy doesn't work as soon as anybody figures out what the secret is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so Columbine and I and a whole bunch of other people are doing a damn good job of revealing the big secret to the public. And then, you know, another thing about the elite is they're not all negative. You know, in other words, like, for example, Obama could not be where he is if he weren't part of the elite. Mm-hmm. It's just impossible, okay? So let's go back to day 6 for a minute, and let's go back to the eclipses in the astrology, and let's try to get a handle on what's going on during July 2009. Okay?
Let's do that. We have a caller, actually, so before we go into that, Barbara, let's take a call from Jay in Alberta. Hi, Jay. Thanks for waiting. You have a question for Barbara?
Yes, Hillary. Thanks, Barbara. It's very information. It's very informative. My question is in regards to 2012 is that how about this planet called Wormwood? How does it throw off, or does it is there something missing out of the Mayan calendar predictions?
Right. Thank you for calling, Jay, and you really hit a bingo on that one. I'm the author of a very nice little book in 2001 called Catastrophobia. And the basic thesis of catastrophobia is that we went through a major cataclysm on this planet from about 14,000 to 11,500 years ago, which in fact is a scientific fact. Our whole solar system went through a great cataclysm. And as far as I'm concerned, and this is what I worked on in Catastrophobia, I believe that the current tendency to believe the world is coming to an end at this moment or soon, I believe that phobia, which I call catastrophobia, is coming from a catastrophe that happened a long time ago. And the reason that people are still feeling like the world is coming to an end is because our scientists, archaeologists, anthropologists, and all that have not given us the real truth about the previous cataclysm. So, of course, I read that. I know the book that you're referring to regarding Wormwood, and I read it, of course, when it came out because I read everything. And then I watched right away to see if the stuff that they said was going to happen actually occurred, such as certain things being sighted by the South Pole in 2008. And as usual, the stuff they said that was going to happen didn't happen. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just like the latest date from the Jehovah's Witnesses. I haven't heard yet whether they've adopted December 21st, 2012, as the end of the world. But if they haven't done it yet, I'm sure that they will pretty soon. In other words, I'm not afraid of what's coming at all. And I do think that there are things about our solar system that we're not being told the truth about. I do think it's possible that we are part of a binary sun system. In other words, that we have a twin sun. But the difference between me and people who focus on Wormwood and who look at it the way they do is I just don't look at this thing from a fearful perspective. Catastrophobia posits that the catastrophe already happened and we're moving into a period of stability at this point. But that's a great question.
Interesting. I just wonder about the weather and the sun. Does the weather actually right now, with the sun being so without some sunspots, is that some of the signs of that whatever is coming is I don't know, I would just say giving us signs that to prepare or evolve basically for what's coming?
We are definitely experiencing, as you well know and I know, a lot of intense weather changes, and it's going to become much, much more intense. And so where this is coming from, I think, is if you go back through our evolutionary history, for example, one of the most interesting underworlds that Kalaman identifies is called the mammalian underworld, and it's 820 million years long. This is the second underworld. And during the mammalian underworld, we have 126 million year-long cycles of evolutionary breakthroughs. But if you analyze each one of the evolutionary breakthroughs, such as the Cambrian explosion or the beginning of mammals after the end of the dinosaurs, what you will see in our evolutionary history is a major extinction before we go through another critical leap in evolution. And so definitely as we come to the end of the calendar, we have to expect the extinction of something. But the question is what? And I think it's war and stupidity. And I also think that there is going to be tremendous climate stress to deal with, tremendous change on this planet. And I think what we have to do is we have to embrace the energy, because the energy is actually very exciting. And I don't expect it to be easy, but I just don't see it as a catastrophe, if you follow what I mean.
Very interesting.
And I'm, you're thinking about the same thing I think about every day, okay? And there's everybody else is thinking about. And if you get into my work, I don't know if you ever have before, but you'll find that I may be one of the most optimistic people on the planet, and certainly I can't be accused of not looking at the negative side of issues. I've looked at all of it. I've read every single catastrophophobia book that's ever been written.
And that's a hard thing to claim, Barbara, by the way, which is one of the reasons I love your work. Jay, do you have another question you'd like to ask?
Sure, I'll take it off the air, too. Is that my question is that how does one prepare for 2012? Or after that, beyond that, to that point? It's always the focus, seems like, right now. But what does a person do to evolve their soul towards love, between now and 2012? What kind of what we see in ourselves changing?
Yeah, okay. Now, Jay, one of the things that has gone on with the people working with Kalaman versus the people who focus on 2012 is that the people working with Kalaman's model are working on it day by day, week by week, month by month. There's a tremendous tendency in the people who focus on 2012 to kind of just focus on December 21st, 2012. And anybody who's doing that is not going to be making the critical leap in evolution, because the critical leap in evolution involves becoming compassionate, it involves becoming a loving person, it involves going beyond inner warfare so that outer warfare can end. And it involves a tremendous level of healing of our consciousness in order to take that step. So it's a day-by-day, hour-by-hour process. And that would be the big difference between people focusing on the evolutionary model and then people who focus on December 21st, 2012. For example, John Major Jenkins is the main person who's working with December 21st, 2012, and lately Greg Braden. And they just focus on the galactic alignment, December 21st, 2012. Well, in fact, the closest point of the galactic alignment was actually during May of 1998. And when it happened, it created a tremendous amount of physical changes on this planet, which I've cataloged, and psychological changes in my books. And so the Big Bang has already occurred, and what we're living in the middle of right now is a rapidly shifting evolutionary concrescence.
Very interesting. Well, I love your show, and love your guests. And very informative, so thanks so much for both.
Thanks so much for calling, Jay. Barbara, one of the things I'd like to ask you, too, maybe we can get into a little bit before the show's over, is do you still work with the channeled information that you have been known for writing?
No. The only thing I've ever channeled was the Pleiadian agenda. And then I've spent the time since then attempting to comprehend what's in it.
Uh-huh.
In other words,
and do you get messages that come through now and then regarding the Mayan calendar?
Yeah, but I get most of my messages by putting all this material together so I can see more about what's really going on. You get insights when you start to put this stuff together. So Let's go to another one. Let's go back to the corresponding period during the national underworld, the 5,125-year cycle. And what we get, as I said, was 1090 to 1150 AD. And this period was the flowering of the medieval awakening. This is when we see Hildegard von Bingen appearing, for example, the incredible musician, artist, and mystic and painter. And what happened suddenly at this turning point during the national is just a tremendous breakthrough in society, on the planet, as well as consciousness. And so if you look at it, when we go back to these two previous periods, this would signal that we're in the middle of a big breakthrough moment at this point. And so then that's when I tend to turn to astrology. And so isn't it interesting that right during this breakthrough moment, in terms of Kalaman's timing, we're in the middle of a period of two Cancer new moons. We had the summer solstice was the sun going into Cancer June 21st. Then we had a new moon in Cancer on the 22nd. And then we have another new moon in Cancer coming up July 21st. And then what happened was the full moon of July 7th, between these two moons, was a lunar eclipse. And then the new moon, July 21st, is not only a Cancer solar eclipse, but it's the closest eclipse that I've been able to find in hundreds of years. Now, these kinds of forces just release tremendous potential for change. And so the thing to look for is to go back to July 7th, which was the lunar eclipse, very close lunar eclipse. And what happened July 7th is while the masses of people on the planet were focused on the Michael Jackson Memorial, Obama was in the Soviet Union bringing through a major nuclear reduction accord. And according to astrology and according to the Mayan calendar, we have just made a significant turn toward world peace. And I'm serious about this.
Oh, yeah. It's just so, 2 days ago, it's just so recent. And so how do people relate that personally? I mean, do they look for something going on in regards to change in their own personal lives, too, on an individual level?
Yeah, so then, of course, at the personal level, as you can imagine, I work on it as an astrologer, of course, and that's where I do Astroflash on handclow2012.com, because what I'm doing, this period in history is so intense that what I'm doing is I'm publishing free information monthly, tracking this whole thing astrologically, and I'll tell you, if I weren't doing it, I think I would be completely insane. I really mean this. I'm not exaggerating. Okay, for example, during May, June, and July, the asteroid or planet Chiron is exactly conjunct Jupiter and Neptune. And when I say exactly conjunct, I mean less than 1 degree. And so Chiron rules the wounded healer complex. And the wounded healer complex is the ability to go into the deepest wounding. For instance, Jay's issue with dealing with fear of catastrophes. And Chiron rules the ability to go into the deepest level of wounding in order to heal ourselves. Because as long as we have those festering, boiling wounds within, we can't get it, Then Neptune rules the process of this kind of the edges of our personal consciousness with the consciousness of the divine mind. The best way to understand Neptune is to think of it as the boundary between your awareness and then the awareness of the most divine consciousness in the universe. So with Chiron and Neptune conjunct, we've got the boundaries to spirit being eroded away as we go into the deepest level of wounding within. And then Jupiter, the planet of expansion, is blowing the whole thing to smithereens and making it as big as a supernova. And so since May, June, July, we're still right in the middle of this whole thing right now, this gathering of Chiron, Jupiter, and Neptune in 2526 Aquarius has been, first of all, just intensely exploding our resistance to being honest and getting clear and coming to a level of greater humanity. And then all the other planets have been aspecting that complex because it's sitting there tight as a drum right in late Aquarius. And so, of course, guess what? These new moons and these eclipses have been having exact aspects to the Chiron-Jupiter-Neptune complex, which I call the triple conjunction. So the eclipses, which are all set up to explode us beyond the solar mind and into the universe itself, are being highly activated by the triple conjunction, Chiron, Jupiter, and Neptune. So I use the astrology as a way to understand how our healing and opening process is going, because all of us are just blown to smithereens right now. I'm not kidding you. I've been doing this type of this is called macro astrology versus natal astrology. We use stars, we use galaxies, we use it all. And I've been doing this for 35 years now. I've never seen anything like this going on, and also since 1999, the astrological transits have been just off the charts with great grand squares and all kinds of amazing eclipses, the Mayan calendar is somehow also connected to the astrological process.
Yeah.
Funny.
And so when we're moving into the new moon with the solar eclipse, it's a pretty big solar eclipse too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the closest one in hundreds of years, which means that when the eclipse actually occurs, it doesn't affect us in this hemisphere. It's going to mainly affect, in terms of the path, China and India and some of the islands in the Pacific. But when it occurs, it lasts much longer than normal because it's so close. So it's really quite extraordinary. And judging by what was going on with the with the full moon, which was July 7th, I'm expecting big things with this eclipse because of what went on with the full moon. If we see, for instance, the Russians and the Americans able to start to cut down on the missile defense shield, there's a big argument going on about placing American missiles close to the Soviet Union. Only Bush could come up with an idea. Bush came up with that idea. But the Russians are saying adamantly, you do this and you're going to get it. And they're not kidding. They're not going to allow this, you know. And so if we see progress on this with the new moon or from now until the new moon, we'll know that we have achieved a real turning point and we're moving back to a planet of peace.
You know, and so if people are experiencing, you know, I have a private practice as a Reiki practitioner too, and, you know, a lot of people have a lot of emotional stuff coming up now, you know, and it's just everybody's stuff is in everybody's face, like you were talking about before. And so in terms of being positive and turning it into a more positive and empowering time, what would you suggest people do on a personal level to switch that, you know, heaviness, which can be so associated with the emotional, you know, load that people can experience at these kinds of times? You know, I often tell my clients to do, you know, ceremony or to go out and do, you know, spend the day out in nature or something. What would you suggest?
Well, I certainly agree with you that nature is probably about the most soothing thing that we have, although if these weather changes or changes, ripping that. But I think that we need to introduce an old idea that people used to hold to that helped them a lot. I think humanity is going to have to return to having a look at the possibility that we can attain courage. Courage is the higher vibration of the heart. And I think that these times are extremely difficult, and I think that we need to turn our consciousness to higher values. I thought it was highly symbolic that people are hooked on the Jackson Memorial while, you know, amazing peace accords are being attained, you know, distraction versus getting to the real point. And the other issue besides character and attaining courage, and of course, we need to do body work. We need to eat in a healthy way. I mean, all of those things are more important than they ever have been before. But another big issue that most people are dealing with is financial. And the financial issue is a very, very tough issue because it would certainly appear to me and to many other people that the difficulty is not over with yet. In fact, I think what's going on is I think that the Western world and now the rest of the world, eastern part of the planet, have adopted the idea that money is energy. I think if you look at the national underworld for 5,125 years, and then I think if you go if you go into the planetary underworld since 1755, I think we see a building tendency to use money as energy and to start to think of money as our energy. And I think that we are in the middle of learning how to take our energy back because our energy isn't money. And I don't really think anybody really wants their energy to be money. Mm-hmm. Go through tremendous change on this issue, and there's no question this is going to be difficult. And so there's a number of steps that people will see. We've been out there teaching people to do this a few years ago because now it's more difficult. But the most important thing that any of us can do is to get rid of debt as much as possible, because the whole system of money being energy is actually based on debt. and based on, a bag of hot air, to tell you the truth. Where's the money, if you know what I mean? It's disappearing. Everybody's saying, well, where is it? And I think there's a lesson in this. It never was there in the first place. In other words,
it's true. It's true. They've created a whole system made out of debt, and the whole system is supported on the illusion of having the money in the first place.
That's right. And so all of us as individuals, we need to do whatever we can to get out of debt. And by the way, that includes for a lot of people various forms of bankruptcy. Getting rid of credit card debt by paying off half of it, or whatever people need to do. People really should be working on the debt issue. And then the other side of it, from a financial point of view, is that economists have been really amazed that Americans aren't spending more money right now. Well, I think it's because a lot of people are moving in together. I think children are moving in with their parents, and grandparents are moving in with their children. And I think the whole landscape of the way people live is probably changing at this point because of the collapse of the financial system. And I actually think that people are going to be quite happy. But what you don't want to do is be a sitting duck who just goes charging along with your credit card.
Do you think it could also be, too, that people are just, making progress in, healing and their mindsets and seeing it for what it is and not being so pulled in directions of consumerism and materialism as they were before?
Yes, I do. I think that once people manage to heal themselves emotionally and psychologically, I think one of the first things they notice is a lot of really bad habits go away right away because you just are a more connected person. So I think that there's many threads going on for people. The healing is progressing, and at the same time they're starting to free themselves from money being defined as their energy. And another thing I'd like to bring out too, Hillary, is I think a wave of death is going on right now. And I'm judging this. I have contact with an awful lot of people. And I've never seen so many people reporting lose. It isn't just about parents dying and older people. It's also about a lot of young people dying right now. And so I think there's a tendency in the middle of this field for some people to just bag out of it. And as we go through this, and I don't know whether you're noticing this personally or not, but
yeah, totally. And I think that I have my own personal thoughts on it, and I think that they're just kind of it's their time to go, and they're going into other dimensions to work and help in the transition of this particular time and in different ways.
That's what I think is going on too, but of course that can sound really callous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And so I think, right. And so one of the things I think is just so important right now is to just really support people who have lost somebody. We just went through the latest one, bunch of kids being killed in a car. A whole big group of kids in New Mexico, and this was connected to us because one of the girls lived in our old house, and our son still owns it, and all blah blah blah. And what was amazing was to watch my younger children go through this. My daughter is 30 and my son is 32, and so they were deeply connected with a really horrific accident. And I just couldn't believe how strong they were and how faithful they were. They were cooking food for people and dealing with whatever they needed the way my grandparents used to do. Mm-hmm. So I think that if we can move into heart consciousness and into courage now, I think there's just a wellspring of energy and power for us that we can draw on. I really believe that's true. And each one of us is going to make our own choice about what we're going to put up with here,
Yeah, I think we need each other now more than ever, to be honest with you. What I've seen in my own personal life and those of the people that I work with and talk to on a regular basis is that, we're all going, no matter who we are or what we do, we're going to all experience a variety of degree of whatever this is, and we need the support of each other. We need the friendship and the compassion and the understanding to assist us through things instead of the judgment or, the sometimes people think that, that's a bad situation, I don't want anything to do with it. But instead of walking away from something, come at it or look at it with a sense of compassion and be there for that person and just, I think we've lost touch with that. I think that's something that is asking to come back on a big scale, and I hope it does. I hope people start to wake up and reach out towards one another to help in whatever way, shape, or form needs to be done.
That's true. And let me bring up another interesting element. I think of myself as like a television with a certain point of view where I get information just because of what I do, of course. And because I've been a macro astrologer all these years, I also, first of all, I come out with all these ideas and I come up with an analysis of things and post it and all that stuff. But I also get a lot of feedback on what I'm saying and how it's working for people and all this kind of stuff. And what I've noticed this summer is something I've never seen in 35 years, which is people seem to be responding more obviously and clearly to planetary patterns than I've ever noticed before. In other words, the idea would be these patterns happen and they have a certain influence on the Earth, and that people respond to them in a certain way. And then astrologers, of course, read all of that stuff. Now, as a counseling astrologer, which I was years ago, we judge how much people are growing by how much they respond to their transits. Like for example, we all get Saturn return when we're 29 or 30 years old. And with our Saturn return, that's when we adopt a form in life we make a big change at that point so we can grow emotionally. And so some people get married, some people have a baby, some people get divorced or whatever. But people make a big structural change in their lives because they're going to grow emotionally during their 30s. And so as astrologers, about 90% of the people do that. They change profoundly when they're 29 or 30. And if they don't, we know that they're not growing. You follow the principle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the idea, and then the next one's midlife crisis, which is caused by Uranus, opposite Uranus. This is the material that's in liquid light of sex. The idea would be that if it's true that people are really responding to astrology a lot more now, the astrological transits, than they used to, then this is a sign that people are growing from a collective point of view.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Are you familiar with Wayne Herschel's work by any chance?
Oh.
Wayne, somebody I just crossed paths with recently, and he's coming on the show in a couple months, and he's done some really phenomenal work with star maps and how they align to the old sites like in Egypt and Mexico and all those different places around the world, and how he's deciphered these star maps, and he has shown how they all point back to the Pleiades. And I know that you're very connected with that particular constellation, and I'm interested in your opinion in, do you think we were actually visited, by ETs, extraterrestrials, in the beginnings, and, the ancients mapped out there?
We're coming to the end of this, and this is the most important point. The Mayan code gets into exopolitics. Exopolitics is a new field of study that's coming mainly out of the Stanford Research Institute. It's Alfred Lambermont Weber. And the idea would be that our planet was quarantined about 11 or 12,000 years ago from the rest of the universe because we were a violent species, a violent and abusive species. And, of course, from my point of view, I jumped right into that because I wrote Catastrophobia, and Catastrophobia explores this gigantic cataclysm. So I completely agree with the exopolitics folks that we've been quarantined in the universe. But the idea would be that the end of the calendar signals the end of the quarantine, which would mean that we would stop being a violent and abusive species. So now you can see why I'm concentrating so much on these moves toward peace. Mm-hmm. And I think there's no question that Obama is a man of peace. So if we go back to the period before the cataclysm, which is about 13, 14 years ago, 1,000 years ago, which I've done in many ways. I've done it through past life regression. I've done it through sacred body postures where I've traveled back into the Paleolithic period. And if you go back before the cataclysm, we were not quarantined. So guess what? The Pleiades were part of our world. So when you go back into that Paleolithic period, you'll find constant evidence that the Paleolithic people were in touch with the Pleiades. Well, they were, in fact. And what's happening is now we're moving back into being in touch with the Pleiades. And this is an extremely significant thing because as our quarantine is removed and as we go back into the universe, the first deep contact for us with the Pleiades, because the Pleiades system is the star system of love. So as we end the violence and end the war and end the pain and destruction and woundedness, then we go back into being in touch with the Pleiadians.
And do you think that some people have suggested it's the return of the gods? Do you think that it's an alignment that allows, certain beings to actually come back to this planet?
I, of course, have thought about all of that stuff. And one of the things the Pleiadians say about that is they say that it's very interesting. They say that because our planet went through this, it was actually the solar system cataclysm. It was caused by a supernova. And because our solar system went through this, and because Earth is like a teaching planet, they say that when we come back into the universe and back into cosmic consciousness in 2011, 2012, only a few years from now, if you can imagine it, they say that we are going to be the teachers about how to heal from woundedness and pain. Because in other words, we've gone through this just major, difficult process here, and that we're going to emerge as teachers. And so when you think of how many of us are mastering healing and mastering the physical body issues and psychological issues, that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah. That's an interesting and very positive take on it. Have you ever read the Hathor material by Tom Kenyon?
He's a good friend of mine. Sure, I have.
It's an excellent piece,
he picks up. When I pick something up, Tom picks it up, basically, or vice versa. Yeah.
It's really a good book. I'm reading it now, and I highly recommend it, along with your work, to anybody listening, because the emotional stuff that they talk about in that book, I think, really has a lot to do with what we've been speaking about this past hour. So, Barbara, what do you have going on this summer? People can work with you or get in touch with you and go deeper into what you teach.
Well, first of all, they can always tune in to Free Astrology on handclow2012.com. And if you go on our website, then you just press AstroFlash, and you're right there. Like the next new moon report will get posted in about a week or something like that. And then we're teaching a workshop at Lilydale, New York, which is south of Buffalo, and people just have to go to our website. We're teaching that, July 17th and 18th. Then we're teaching at Kripalu Yoga Center in upstate New York on the 24th through 25th or 26th of July. And, again, that's posted on the website. And then in the fall, we're teaching in Sweden and maybe Scotland, but I think it's probably just going to be Sweden. So we're teaching a series.
And are you teaching at Lilydale again in October?
Yeah, we are, as a matter of fact. I forgot about that. Yeah, in that case, we're teaching for the Lilydale Healing School, Healing Mastery School, but people can also go to that workshop. They open that to everybody.
Yeah, I'm going to be trying to make that, so I'm looking forward to meeting you in person and being able to work with you. And is Jerry, your husband, going to be there teaching as well?
We always teach together, yeah.
It's fantastic. So again, folks, Barbara Hand-Clow, and you can find a link to her website on my website, HillaryRaimo.com, also Chief Radio homepage as well as my radio homepage. And I will be featuring a link to her monthly astrology on my weekly newsletter as well. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with her information. Her books, which I highly recommend, my favorite, Alchemy of the Nine Dimensions, The Pleiadian Agenda, and most recently, the Mayan Code. I'd like to end by wishing a good friend and colleague of mine, Mary Lamondo, happy birthday. Today is her actual birthday, and she was excited about Barbara coming on the show because she's one of your biggest fans. So, Barbara, I'd love it if you could wish Mary happy birthday for me.
Happy birthday to you. That's great. Good.
She's an astrologer, and she really enjoys and loves your work. She's a big fan. So everybody, thank you so much for joining. Barbara, it's such a pleasure to have you come on and talk about these things. And for those of you listening, highly suggest you go back and listen to the archives. The previous shows that Barbara's done have been extremely informative and are well worth the time and effort to listen to again. So thanks, Barbara, and I look forward to bringing you on again to update us on the Mayan calendar and what's going on in the world.
We go into night 6 in November. We go into another phase. Maybe then there's something like that.
Absolutely. You can count on it. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. You can always find the most current and updated list of coming guests on my website, HillaryRaimo.com. And until next time, live well. Namaste.